I'm delighted to be hosting tonight's Hero Hangout, not just because tonight's guest is an Empire hero, he's also an Empire icon, and he's also an Empire Award winner. He won Best Actor in 2002 for Fellowship of the Ring. I wonder if he still has the trophy. Please welcome Elijah Wood.
Wow, what a beautiful theater. Thank you.
Absolutely. And what about Set Fire to the Stars? How did it come about for you?
I was sent the script from my agent in a relatively standard way, and he, it came very highly recommended. He said he read the script, that he described what it was about, and that it was this sort of two-hander about Dylan Thomas and his first trip to the United States. Mm-hmm. And I read the script, and you know, I think sometimes when you come across biographical material, it can be handled in a relatively literal or stale way, or feel overly historic or reverent. And this wasn't that at all. This wasn't a biopic. It had movement and energy to it that was really exciting, and it kind of jumped off the page. Even though it was really an acting piece, it was primarily two characters. Yeah. So I really fell in love with it, and I fell in love with the character of John Malcolm Brennan, who was a real man, who was the poet and poetry professor who brought Dylan Thomas to the United States. Mm-hmm. And then I ultimately met with Andy Goddard and had a chat with him, and he further detailed the kind of movie that he wanted to make, and the fact that he wanted to shoot it in black and white, that Griff Rhys was going to do the score, which was really exciting. In fact, I think after our first meeting, he emailed me and said, yeah, he mentioned Cannes as a reference for the music that he wanted to do. I was like, fucking Cannes, fantastic. This is going in a great direction. And it had all these elements that were incredibly sort of exciting. The approach was going to be very exciting. And then I ultimately had a conversation with Kellen, who plays Dylan Thomas in the film. And
co-wrote it as well, didn't he?
Yeah, he co-wrote it as well. Yeah. And that was kind of it, you know. I was also keen to work on something that was strictly performance-based. I felt like I hadn't done anything that was just about characters in a while. And there was something really refreshing about that notion of going to Wales and working on characters for 18 days.
Let's go all the way back to the beginning.
Let's go back.
Let's go back. Let's all go back, everybody. Come on with us. As we go back to your beginning, your debut in movies, which was Back to the Future Part 2.
Yeah.
Where you played Video Game Boy.
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
Mind-blowing. Mind-blowing. Because I'd seen Back to the Future and loved Back to the Future. So it was too much. I mean, I was just recently turned 8, and there I was in the Hill Valley set in the future with futuristic cars driving around. Yeah. It was too much. And Marty McFly walking by, and it was really, truly mind-blowing. It was so awesome. I was just fascinated by all of it because, you know, prior to that, I'd worked on a couple of commercials, so you know, there was nothing to sort of encapsulate like what was happening. I'd literally come from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, moved to Los Angeles with palm trees and shit. I worked on a couple of commercials. The first job I had was a Paula Abdul music video. That was crazy. Paula Abdul, like, what is going on? And all of it, I somehow remember taking it in stride a little bit too, which is weird. Like, my adult memory is like, yeah. But I had to have been freaking out. I think maybe the adult's freaking out, and the kid was just like, yeah, it's cool. But yeah, and then being on that set, because I did have a context for it, because I remember the original film, so it's basically the same. It is the same location, and they just decked it to make it look like it was the future. And I was obsessed with the future at that age as well. Like the idea of flying cars was something I was obsessed with. So it was all just right there. It was awesome.
And of course, that film takes place in 2015. That's next year.
That's right.
That's next year.
That's right. We have a lot of work to do.
A lot of work to do. Flying
hoverboards.
Cars. Yep, hoverboards.
Yeah.
Jaws 19.
Jaws 19.
Directed by Max Spielberg.
That's right.
Get a move on Spielberg, honestly.
There are, how many Jawses in existence? 5, right?
4.
There's 4. And this is Jaws 19?
Yeah.
Jesus. They're going to have to be VOD, direct to VOD.
So 14 sequels, and then we can get Max Spielberg directing.
Or
Jaws
you could just do Jaws 19 and do like a really long previously on section. Previously on, and have it be a really crazy montage.
I can see you in that movie.
It'd be awesome.
I can see being like, Martin Brody's great-great-great-great-great-grandson, who's really annoyed with the shark, who's also the great-great-great-great-grandson of the original shark.
Fantastic.
Let's do it.
Let's totally do it. Let's realize the dream. There's so much cool shit happening for nerds right now. There really is. They're making another Star Wars movie. That's happening. That's happening.
That's happening right now.
Yeah, like
right now.
10 years ago, you would have been like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill and Harrison Ford are going to be in a new trilogy. What?
Yes.
Shot on film on anamorphic lenses with practical effects. No. That's insane.
It's crazy.
What
It's
is
crazy.
going on?
And you have to think, even now, as we speak, someone's being crushed on set of a new Star Wars movie.
They're delaying it another 6 months.
Is it true that Austin is also where you first learned of Lord of the Rings?
What a fine story. Yeah, it actually is. I was on set of the.
Set 'em up, you
I was
knock 'em
on.
down.
Yeah.
That's it.
I was on the set of The Faculty, and Harry Knowles was on set, and he came over to me and he's like, "Dude, they're making a film version of Lord of the Rings, and Peter Jackson's directing it." And I knew Peter's work because I'd seen Dead Alive and I'd seen Heavenly Creatures and loved Peter Jackson and The Frighteners. A very underappreciated film. Mm-hmm. You can see it.
Have you seen Meet the Feebles, by the way?
Fucking Meet the People is so great. It's a classic. What was he on? It's so insane. So yeah, and he said you should play Frodo, is what Harry Knowles said.
Yeah.
And this is a good year and a half, or about a year, until they actually genuinely started casting. So this was 1990, summer of '97, and I think I put myself on tape sometime in early 1999, it would have been, spring of 1999, because I ended up traveling to New Zealand in August of '99. So yeah, it was a good year and change before they actually started casting.
That's pretty amazing.
And that was his prophetic, you should play Frodo.
Well, I
sir,
will.
maybe I will.
I'll show you, Harry Knowles.
Right.
So
Watch this. Ridiculous.
So the videotape, was it an audition, or would you just put something down?
It was an audition. Well, it was in lieu of an audition.
Okay.
Because what they were doing, Peter was traveling around to various cities. To London, I'm sure he went to New York. Obviously, he was based a lot in New Zealand. I think they did some castings in Australia that he went to as well. So when my agent called, she said that they're casting for Lord of the Rings. And the only way I could read the script was actually going to the Los Angeles casting office. They weren't giving the script out, understandably. And I sat down and I read it. And it was a script for the first film, and it blew my mind. And I remember driving home and feeling like I was still in the world, and feeling like there might be like orcs and goblins. I just felt so immersed, like reading a book. It was beautiful. So the next step, obviously, was to audition. And I hated the idea, because Peter wasn't coming through town anytime soon, so there was no way to just like meet him, and plus he was meeting everybody. So my agent said, well, you'll just have to go in to the casting office, they'll put you on tape, and that'll be the process. But I didn't like the idea of going into a sort of stale white room and reading a scene opposite someone behind a camera. I just didn't, I felt like I had to do something that I had a little bit more control over and could articulate my passion and enthusiasm for the role in a way that would differentiate itself from other things. And so I ended up doing my own tape. And I got a book on hobbits, and I had a pretty good idea I'd read The Hobbit, I had a good idea of what they look like. But I ended up just sort of looking at the various costume ideas and things. And I went to Western Costume, which is this big sort of costume warehouse for films in Los Angeles, and I got an approximation of that kind of outfit.
Yeah.
Sort of knee pants and, those suspenders and the whole thing. And a little waistcoat. And filmed it, but one scene in my house at the time with a couple friends of mine. And then we went to sort of a woodsy location and filmed 2 other scenes. And it was the audition scenes were wild. One of them was a scene that kind of didn't end up existing. They were all sort of approximations of scenes. One of them was Gandalf arriving at Frodo's doorstep and Frodo opening the door and greeting Gandalf. That never happened. But it was like a Gandalf greeting scene. And then there was, Then there was a scene from film 2, I believe. So it was basically the 3 scenes were articulating roughly the sort of transformation that Frodo has. The last scene being kind of almost not Frodo anymore. And we shot them and then went to Miramax's offices that night, I think, and used their editing bay. And my friend cut it together, and I had a VHS copy, 2 VHS copies the next day. VHS, dudes. And then,
VHS.
That's right. Those were the days. And so then I took the VHS copy to the casting director, and then she sent it off to London. That's kind of how it happened. The main thing, actually, in some ways, the most sort of the real emotional satisfaction of having made that tape truly came from one of the employees of the casting office who kind of took me from one seating area to another to wait to meet Peter and Fran. Fran was there too, which I was super excited about because Fran wrote Heavenly Creatures. That was awesome. Anyway, he sat me down and he said, "Oh, by the way," he said, we were all really impressed with what you did in that tape. We found it he said something like, we found it moving or something. And it was you really tell how passionate you were. And that's all I wanted to achieve, in a way. Like that, I'd won at that point.
Yeah.
Like prior to even meeting Peter, the fact that I had done this thing, I'd sort of gone out on a limb and done something I'd never really done before, which doesn't take that much courage. I just did this thing. I made this tape with my friends. But the fact that it had achieved the very thing that I intended overall was the greatest satisfying thing. And I went home and I went in and auditioned and met with Peter and everything, but I still had that resonating with me when I was driving home. I did it, regardless of whether I get the role. I did what I wanted to do, and that was a cool thing. Guys, thank you so much.
Elijah Wood.
Thank you so much. That was really awesome. Thank you.